Hello, my name is Hershey Millner. I'm a casting director, and welcome to Sisters in the Round. Sisters in the Round is dedicated to fostering inclusive and empowering communities within the theater industry, specifically for intergenerational Black women and femmes. Today, I'm so excited to speak with Destiny Lilly, casting director extraordinaire. Destiny, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you so much, Hershey. I'm Destiny Lilly. I'm a casting director. I'm based in New York, and I mostly work in film, theater, and television.
Wonderful. Well, I'd love to start with kind of your beginnings. I'll say for myself, I didn't know that the job of casting director existed until I was almost ready to graduate from college. So how did you get first introduced to casting?
Yeah, I'd heard the term casting director, but I didn't really know what a casting director did until I was much older. I have a theater background, so I loved, watching plays and musicals as a kid, and watching movie musicals with my mom was something that we would do on weekends sometimes when I was a kid, like rent a movie musical to watch. And that made me start doing, like the school play and things in high school. And when I went to college, I went to Emory University in Atlanta. So, it's a liberal arts school. You don't have to really decide what you're going to major in until a little bit later on. So I went in thinking I was going to major in political science and psychology and focus on being a lobbyist in Washington was what I thought I would do. And then pretty quickly I got swept up in, some of my classmates were doing like plays, and it had just honestly, it never really occurred to me that theater and musicals and plays and the things that I loved as a kid could be a career. I thought, you go to college to learn something practical, to learn something that you're going to be able to like then get a job doing. So within, I don't know, about 9 months, I'd abandoned my psychology and poli-sci ambitions and decided I was going to major in theater studies and English literature. So then that is exactly what I did. And I got very involved in theater in college, and then went to grad school in the UK and studied theater, and then came to New York with the idea of being a director and a sound designer in the city. And I did that for a couple of years, well, longer than that, maybe 5 years or so, and got like some directing fellowships and different opportunities. But I wasn't able to really figure out how to be like a working director. It can take a long time to be able to make a living from directing plays, or even more than a small amount from directing plays. And I was at a point where I was like, I need to be making, more money just to survive in New York City. So I was figuring all that out. I had side jobs. I had, there's, how it is in your 20s. You're like, I'm figuring it out. And then, so through one of the fellowships I had was a directing residency at the Ensemble Studio Theater. And the team there, they asked me if I wanted to use my like fellowship hours to help the casting director, who was at that time casting a series of one-act plays. They would do a marathon of one-act plays. And I said, sure, that sounds great. Sure. And I loved it. I loved working with the actors. I loved I was like the audition monitor, and I would check people in, and I would talk to them, and I'd get their headshots, and I'd read their resumes, be like, oh, they were in this and this and this. And I would recognize some of the actors, and I just loved it. I was like, well, this is great. This is something that I could do for real, maybe one day. And then pretty shortly after that, that casting director recommended me for my first job in casting, which was actually casting extras and what, like background actors. And what I learned from that is that I did not want to cast background actors. It's a very tough job. But I learned so much just about like how film production works and commercials and like so many things, right? I learned a lot. But I was like, I want to cast more principals. So I then started working with every person I knew and every person I met, being like, I'll cast your short film, I'll cast your play, I'll do this, I'll do that. And then that turned into me getting more opportunities to cast, film, theater, a little bit of everything. And then I worked at the School of Visual Arts for a while, working with their film department, working with their students, casting student films, which was great. And then I started working at the Telsey office, which is a bi-coastal casting office, in 2017. And I've been there since and have had the opportunity to work on a lot of projects, a lot of theater. I'd say about 50% of what I do is theater, and the other 50% is film and television. And across the board, musicals, plays, big movies, small movies, TV series. I've really been fortunate to be in a position to work across the board and work with a lot of great actors, but also really talented people. And one of the things I love most about my job is that I get to work with people whose work, I studied, or, like I've worked with like Lynn Nottage and George C. Wolfe, these legends who are so brilliant. And it's really exciting to be able to contribute to the growth of new work.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you for that broad overview. There are so many parts of your journey that resonated with me in terms of kind of stumbling into casting. I got an apprenticeship at McCarter Theatre Center when I graduated undergrad. And that was my first time. I was like, maybe this could be a job. Maybe theater isn't just an elective or for hobbies. But I'm very curious about the fact that you started as a director first, because I kind of went directly into casting. Do you find that your experience as a director helps you as a casting director, helps you better understand maybe what they're looking for or how to help them communicate when they may not know what they're looking for?
Yes, 100%. I think that a lot of the skills overlap because you're doing a lot of the same things. You're breaking down a script. You're making character breakdowns. You're getting a sense of who would be most right for these roles based on, the script as written, but also your conversations with the writer, especially if you're doing a new play. You're working with actors. You're hopefully giving them some kind of guidance on how to find these roles. I think that honestly, casting uses the part of directing that I always liked the most, because when I was directing, once we would get into rehearsal, like I still liked it, but it was always a little sad because then there was no more possibility. I always liked the part of casting where it's like this person, or it could be this person. This person. And then once you get into rehearsal, you're excited about your cast, obviously, but there's not that same sense of, it could be a new person. I think of it like, when you're dating versus when you're in a relationship, it's the relationship is great, but there's not that same spark of like possibility of when you're single and you're like, oh, well, it could be this person or this person, and you don't know. It's kind of exciting to meet a person for the first time. But because I work in casting, I get to have that feeling all the time. There's always something exciting, something just around the corner.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's so interesting that you spoke about the spark of possibility. How do you navigate a project or a producer or director who comes into the casting process with a very specific idea of what they want, whether that's physically or whether that's a specific type of training? And how do you kind of help open their eyes to the possibilities of other actors who kind of bring this story to life?
Yeah, it's really my job to serve their vision. So ultimately, I think that is going to win out. But what I try to do is always make it clear that the exact specifics of that vision really only exists in that person's head. So there's not an expectation from the audience that they're going to see exactly what the director or writer imagined in their head. So there is this space in between that I try to navigate to have the actors who will make the story work for the audience, but will also fulfill the vision that the director has. I think that I always try to go back to the text and say, are these choices supported by the text?
Mm.
And oftentimes when you're working with a new, with a film or with a new play, the text is changing. So there are times when the text has changed based on casting, many times, because the person in reality who we were most excited about happened to not quite fit some of the things as written. So they were rewritten, rather than trying to force a situation with an actor who maybe isn't quite as exciting, but fits everything that was on the page. And so it can be a real conversation about what is actually essential in this character. What is actually the thing that we are trying to land? And is it important that they are, for example, a certain age? Or could this person be older or younger and we could work with this actor who's amazing? Like, do we just need to change one line for this to work? Or is it about something deeper? And having those conversations about kind of the why of who these characters are, I think also starts to build that up for the writer too, if you're working with a new writer, because they probably haven't taken that step back to really be like, well, why is this character this age? Or why is this character this ethnicity or this gender? And is that important to the storytelling? And if it is, then we focus on that. And if it's not, then we can be open and start to mold things to fit the actors that we fall in love with.
It sounds like there's a bit of dramaturgy in your approach to casting, which is something that I am really passionate about. Even though I will admit, industry-wide, I'm a little sad that the independent standalone dramaturg is not always a standard part of the creative team. Was that something that you kind of developed over time, realizing you need to kind of get into that why?
I mean, I think that it's important to me in casting to be a collaborator, to really have the process should be different based on who's casting the show. Like, other casting directors are going to navigate a process differently. I firmly believe that if you did an experiment where you had like the same teams working with different casting directors on the same projects, you would many times get a different cast. It is not, we're not interchangeable because of the work that we do and how specific it is, and our approach, and the actors that we are aware of. Like, different casting directors are aware of like different actors. It's a whole different process. And so I think my hope is that people want to work with me because I put a tremendous amount of thought and care into making sure that we are being like both like inclusive and thoughtful in our process, and that we're really looking to expand our definition of who can play a certain role and why, because that just makes it so we're less hung up on things that don't matter as much, and that we're more excited about, let's work with these dynamic performers. Like, I take a lot of pride in introducing people to new talent. I think that is something that is key for a casting director to be doing constantly, is introducing, writers, directors, producers to new talent. And new can mean someone very young, and new could be someone, in their 50s or 60s that just hasn't necessarily crossed paths with that team. I think many people will be surprised by how often very established writers and directors really aren't that familiar with that many actors. They'll know like big stars but beyond that, it's kind of not how they engage with work. I find it fascinating. Sometimes you'll go to a talk back after a film and someone inevitably will get up and ask the director about the different lenses that they use and things that I'm like, wow, that is not at all how I see a film. I'm not like, what kind of lens were you shooting through for? Because that's just not, I'm like, it's pretty, it's not pretty. I don't think about that. I'm not a film director. I'm not a cinematographer.
Mm.
Like, what kind of lenses or why did you choose a wide shot here? Like, that is not how I process it. I process like the story and the actors. So people will be like, well, that film, and they'll start to describe it. And I'll just say, tell me who was in it. Because that's how I'm going to remember what something is. Who are the actors in it? I may not remember all the things about the story or what it looked like, and I may or may not know the director, even though I usually do try to pay attention to that. But the way for me in is through the actors. So when I'm working on a piece, I make it a point to establish myself as like, I'm the person who's the expert in casting and the expert in like the actors. Everyone has their specialty. Everyone has their skill set, but like, that's my skill set. So hopefully my team trusts me to be an expert in that, because that's what I do all day for a living, and is willing and receptive to ideas of people that they may not know or may not have thought might be right.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about the value of introducing new talent and different ideas of what counts as new. When I was doing some research before this interview, I saw that you've referred to yourself as a creative matchmaker. And I really, really love that phrase. And I'm hearing some of the reasonings behind that phrase in your previous answer. But I'd love to know, how did you get to that? How did you get to that very specific metaphor?
I think it's because over time, it's really been about introducing people to new talent that they wouldn't necessarily have found on their own, because it's someone that like I've worked with before, or that I saw in a play 5 years ago and I remembered, and then brought them in for this thing. And then I've seen a number of actors who, like, I've cast in something with a director or with a writer, then go on to do multiple other projects with that same writer or director. And knowing that you can plant the seeds for those kind of creative partnerships is really exciting for me. And I feel a lot of pride in that, being able to start a new creative relationship.
Definitely. I have been fortunate enough to have had experiences where I met an actor maybe at a BFA showcase or cast them in a reading. And then a few years later, I see them doing a national tour, doing their, their first equity contract. And I just like, my little hens, like, they have grown up.
I know. Don't
like,
you
just to be a small
way?
part on their path, I think is really, really fun.
Yeah. I often feel like, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, look at my babies up there. I'm so proud.
Especially what really gets me is when I called them in to audition for a show, let's say like a very popular show, like a Chorus Line, and they made it to callbacks or they made it to the second round, they didn't quite get it. And then like 4 years later, I see they did a Chorus Line at La Jolla, and I'm like, you got it. You figured out your way in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I find it really rewarding to follow like someone's career, to be someone who helped them along the way, whether it was the first job or the most recent job or a job 10 years ago. To be a part of that journey is something that, that I find really rewarding.
Yeah, I feel like for yourself and myself and every casting director I've spoken to, like there is this, like, we love actors. Like we do, there is this investment in themselves and in their career and their artistry. And I can understand with, the table in between and maybe the sense of hierarchy, it can be hard for some actors, maybe younger actors, to know that we really are rooting for them in this space. But I have never heard any casting director say anything other than what we're saying now about how invested we are and how much we enjoy watching them grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I love working with actors. It's very cool. And it's a hard job acting. You know, you put a lot into every step of something, and then most of the time it doesn't lead to a job. So it's a tough job for actors. So I think it's also important for us to really be sensitive to that and be supportive of them, and to do what we can to make that job a little easier.
Agreed, definitely. Shifting tracks a little bit, something that I found very interesting when I first started to develop a professional career in casting is how little training there was, like official training. Like I started in an apprenticeship. Unfortunately, after 2020 and the pandemic, a lot of those apprenticeships are gone. I know that CSA has developed some training, but I'm curious as to how do you, when you're mentoring younger casting directors or people who want to get into casting, how do you recommend they build their skill set? Is it like you did, signing up for short films and reaching out to your network, assisting as much as you can? Are there any like specific resources or books or movies that you felt were really instrumental in your education process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a hard industry to get into because there's not a clear path to entry for casting. I think that if people really want to work in casting, the best thing that they can do is build their knowledge of actors. I think that that is something you can do on your own. You don't have to have a job to do it. That means, watching as much as you can, whether it's like film and TV or theater, watching as much as you can, and then creating some sort of system that works for you so that you can then recall who people are. I think building up that like knowledge base and then having an opinion, because it's one thing to know who actors are, but a lot of the time a director is not just asking you for a list of like all the Asian male actors between 20 and 30. They're asking you for the ones that are really good.
Mm-hmm.
So you can make, sometimes you'll make an exhaustive list to be like, here's an exhaustive list of people. But what a lot of them really want is like, tell me the 5 who I should be seeing for this project. So having that knowledge base of seeing these actors in like different roles and having an opinion about like how strong they are in those roles, and having that sense of an aesthetic to say, I think these are the 5 who we should call in to see. That skill set is something that you can start to build on your own, to start to know who actors are, who you think is good and why, what they're good at. Like that is something you build without actually having a job in casting yet. That is essential when you are actually casting, because like I said, oftentimes people will be surprised. There are directors who know who lots of actors are. There are directors who really only know who the big A-listers are. And if you get into anyone else, they have no idea who these people are. So you can send them a list of names all you want, but it doesn't mean anything to them. So you have to be like, here is my short list of people that I think are good and would be right for this, and here's why. So that, because a lot of these actors are very established and aren't going to audition, but the director might not know who they are. This is very common. So it's my job to say, why I think this person and not this person, so that then that can kind of bridge the gap. Because a lot of the time, actors who are more established aren't going to audition, but the directors don't always know who they are. And you can point them. Another thing that I often do is point the director to like, watch this thing that they did, watch this thing that they did, so that they can get a sense of, the strengths of that actor. But I do think it's really important to develop your aesthetic. I think other things you can do, is yes, like cast, short films, cast, like a web series, verticals, whatever things that are happening that are looking for actors. work with people that you know that are, filmmakers or doing plays, and cast plays at wherever you are, find out how you can cast projects and start to build your own resume so you have something to show for your work. Another thing is, yes, I'm also, I didn't mention this in my bio, but I'm also president of CSA, which is Casting Society. And Casting Society has a training education program for aspiring casting professionals that really focuses on training you to be an assistant, which is very helpful. So it's a broad overview of the duties of a casting assistant in a professional office. So that is a really great program. We only run it usually once a year and take a limited number of students, simply because there aren't enough casting assistant jobs to really justify, bringing in like hundreds of students to learn this craft. That there are some other programs like that as well. Some are related to colleges, and others are for people who are further along in their careers who want to transition into casting. I also think that just letting people know, it's surprising always how much just telling people what you want kind of puts that in the ether, and then other people, when they hear about a thing, will be like, oh yeah, I was talking to, who was I talking to? They're looking for a casting thing. You work in casting. Do you have anything? Oh, you do? That just like letting people in your network know that that's something you're looking for experience there. Oftentimes casting directors might be looking for a PA, like a production assistant, for like one day on an audition, where it's just like, hey, we need somebody to come in and check and, get them lined up, or, just being kind of an extra set of hands during an audition process. So that's a really good way, because it's not necessarily like a full-time job, because it can be harder to get hired for that kind of thing, but you are getting your foot in the door by doing a good job as that PA that's checking people in, making sure that, you're filming the audition, you're making sure that people have all the information that they need, being that extra set of hands. I think that that's also a way to meet other casting people and start to grow the network of people, so that when you've been reliable in that position, okay, now we're looking for someone more, for a longer position or more full time, and they're more likely to reach out to the person they know that's done a good job in the past.
Yeah, that relationship building I feel is so important in every industry, but especially in the theater industry. So I'd love to ask a little bit about, oh no, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, the thing about most jobs in casting is it's rare that they are advertised. It's rare that there is like a job notice for a casting director or casting assistant. It happens, like they exist. And CSA sends out job notices when our members are looking for assistants. But a lot of the time, those jobs are through word of mouth and referral. And so most of the time, there's not something that's posted. So knowing people who could refer you is really key.
Definitely. I was going to say I signed up for that CSA list like as soon as I finished my apprenticeship. So that was also a great way for me to get to know CSA members and kind of the work that they were doing. And if a name I wouldn't recognize, I would go to IMDb Pro and Google them and be like, oh, they worked on this and worked on this. So I think that's a really valuable part too of kind of learning your industry, is like if you see a project that you think is fascinating or a team that you're curious about, seeing like what else they worked with. Because I feel like the longer I do this, I've been in here for 10 years, the world keeps getting smaller, but in a good way. Like everybody is connected in one way or another.
It's true.
So I would love to ask a little bit about your kind of project split with theater and TV and film. At least in my track, I've only done primarily theater. And I am always curious about people who kind of balance multiple. And also, I'd love to know, in your opinion, what casting skills do you think apply to all mediums, and which mediums sometimes require like a slightly different type of casting skill?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly the same. You're looking for good actors, especially, being in New York. So many actors do theater as well. So there's a real overlap. It's all this, it's the same talent pool a lot of the time. Most of the actors do theater, and then most of the theater actors do film and TV. So it's not necessarily a different group of people. You are looking for different skills. And sometimes, the way that an actor should approach, film, theater, and television auditions differently. But the big thing but you're just looking for great people. And I'm still pulling from the same pool of people that I would pull from for anything. And it's not like I would be like, oh, I've only seen this actor do theater, so I'm not going to ask them to audition for TV. Or vice versa. Like sometimes there are people who only do TV because they're not interested in doing theater. Like that comes up. But we'd still ask them, be like, hey, would you be interested in coming in for this play? Or musical? Not everybody sings. But I think the approach in terms of looking for talent is the same. The things that vary the most are your timelines. So you have very different timelines for film, theater, and television. Television, you might have a bit more time to cast your leads, but then once you're in production, you have a very short period of time to cast each episode. So, which is usually somewhere between 3 and 20 days to cast each episode. So it's not a lot of time. So you are often in a position where you're going to be focused on actors that can get the job done, who have a certain amount of like TV credits, who have done similar shows or worked in similar ways before, just because you don't necessarily have time to do like a big search or to, seek out a ton of other people. But you can, when you have a little more time, do a bit more outreach, which is one of the things that is actually a positive of actors doing more self-tapes, because if I was only seeing, people in a room, I might be able to see, 10 people in an hour tops, right? But the way that like the nature of self-tapes, I can watch more than 10 self-tapes in an hour, because it's not about getting a person in the room and then like, why is it okay? There's a whole, you're cutting down so much of the time that an in-person audition would take. Now, I still love in-person auditions and do them all the time, but I think it's a balance, because I'm then able to see people that I would take a chance on, that I wouldn't have been able to see if I only had an hour in person and needed to cast that role that shoots in a day or two. I'm going to only call in people that I know can get this job done and who have those credits and have that experience and who I've worked with before. But if you're getting tapes in, you're going to also reach out to people who are like, this person seems interesting and they might be able to do it, but I just don't know them. But then you can give them that chance. So that is a
Absolutely.
Big, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's nothing that can replace the feeling of like being in the room, especially for callbacks. I really like getting to watch the director and the actor kind of play together and kind of explore. But I will say, because I've mainly worked up and down the East Coast, like New York, Atlanta, Philly, it wasn't until the post-pandemic, when people started to do more self-tapes, that I got introduced to a lot of Chicago actors. I've never worked in Chicago, and because I was able to, do self-tapes for the first round and sometimes even the second round, I felt like I was introduced to like a whole new community of actors with so much great talent that I just never would have met before. Because understandably, it's not really financially feasible or time-wise feasible to have someone fly into Atlanta or Florida from the Midwest. So I feel for my actors who've had to learn almost a new skill, like how to self-tape for theater as opposed to self-tape for TV and film. But I am glad that we have that opportunity as well to kind of take more chances and meet new people.
Yeah, I think that ultimately you can be introduced to so many new people, and there is a balance because I do like to have auditions in person, and for theater we really do, and sometimes for TV and film too, especially if it's a callback or if it's a particular role or if it's on a TV show where we're in pre-production and we haven't started filming yet. We might do some fun in-person auditions, but sometimes it's just not practical because it's like, oh, we're filming every day and our showrunner and our director are on set all the time. So they don't really have time to, take 2 hours out of the day to sit with all these actors coming in. What they're relying on us for is to watch those tapes, narrow that down, and send them the 5 to 8 that are the strongest and most right for the role, so that your job is always changing because it's always figuring out how to navigate what's best for this process, for this project, for this creative team. And that is also changing. Like it might be different when you have 9 months as opposed to when you have 9 days. And how that process is constantly changing. But that's the thing I like about it. No day is the same. Like people always ask like, oh, what's a typical day like for you? And I'm like, they're all different. And I think one thing I do think about casting that people don't realize is how much it is like sitting at a desk on a computer. I think that
I was just about to say.
People think, oh, casting, you're like always in auditions all day, every day. And I'm like, no, you're not in auditions all day, every day, because then you would never get anything done. And we love auditions. I love auditions. But when you're in audition like all day, if you're in like a 10 to 6 audition, all that means is that at the end of the day, you then have to spend hours catching up on every email that you missed and everything that you didn't get to do. Because so much of our work is, answering phone calls, answering emails, sending a link with tapes. Like so much of it is administrative, and having strong admin skills is key to casting. Like you need people with really strong skills in that area.
Absolutely.
So I think it's not as much about just kind of like being in the room with actors all day, which I also love and is also great and is the fun part. But yeah, you have to be really, really
the icing.
Yes, it's the icing. Exactly.
Definitely. When I first started working in casting and was trying to explain to my family what it is I actually did, I was like, well, most days I work at the email factory. I am clocking in, doing emails and paperwork and Breakdown Express and learning to convert files so the director can like watch them on their phone, like all of that admin stuff. So I think they too had that same impression of, oh, you're just with actors all day. And I was like, not exactly, because there's so much work that goes into, building an audition and making sure everybody has their sides and they go to the right studio at Pearl and like all of these things. And then you get to have the kind of the fun part where, well, one of the fun parts, we get to actually kind of like see the work that they do. But yeah, I think that especially when I work with interns, I let them know that the admin, the organization, be able to keep multiple plates spinning at once, especially for me, who I've mainly worked in institutions. So we're pretty much casting the whole season at the same time. We're just at different stages in the process for all of that. All of those skills that I think are really actually interdisciplinary. Like I think that someone who's like a strong casting director or a strong casting assistant can do a lot of other work if they so choose, whether it's project management or anything around that nature, because I feel like we have this grab bag of skills that we use every day, and they can be applied to so many different things.
It's very true. I think that there are a lot of transferable skills in casting, and that you could take those skills to other other parts of the like entertainment industry, but also to just other industries, because it's a strong skill set to develop. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I know we have to wrap up soon, but I have like one or two kind of fun questions I would love to ask you. You mentioned watching movie musicals with your mom growing up, and I also saw that you're a classic film lover on your website. So I'd love to know, do you have like a dream casting project that is like an adaptation of a classic film, or, you know, a Broadway adaptation? You know, I'm thinking about like Some Like It Hot, or all the, you know, Nosferatu, Frankenstein adaptations. Like what's one that you would love to kind of sink your teeth into?
That's a good question. There's definitely, I did watch a lot of movie musicals as a kid. I still do. Sometimes I feel like a lot of those projects, as much as I love them, are better left in the past. You know, some for many reasons don't necessarily translate to our present. But I've always wanted to cast. I've always wanted to cast a production of Sweet Bird of Youth, which is a Tennessee Williams play. I've always wanted to work on that play. I have not worked on it yet. It's a play that I've always gravitated toward, and I've worked on other Tennessee Williams plays, but not that one. Not yet. Not yet. One day. There's a movie of it actually from like, I think 62 with Paul Newman and Geraldine Page, which is great. And I have wanted to work on that show, I think, because I really liked that movie as a kid. Because I was a huge Paul Newman fan. Still am. Still a huge Paul Newman fan. Yes. And then I know so many of the things that I would have said have happened too. So I'm like, oh, I would have said this, but it's like, oh, that happened. And it was kind of disappointing. So maybe it was better not to have happened. But yeah, I also really, I would love to do something like, you know, I spoke about George C. Wolfe earlier, you know, something like he did Shuffle Along years ago, which like took the actual like play Shuffle Along, but then also wrote like the whole kind of backstory of it as well, and used the music and something like that. Because honestly, some of these pieces from back then, I'm like, just putting them back up today doesn't give the context it needs, doesn't quite work for me. But something like that, where you're both like exploring that piece from, you know, like the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, while also bringing something fresh to it, because it has like a new, like there's some new commentary, or, you know, something like that. Oh, that's another one. If anybody's out there, I just recently saw, I teach at Fordham University, which is a really good institution. And there was a student production there of By the Way, Meet Vera Stark, which is a great play by Lynn Nottage that I saw originally when it was off Broadway. And I would love to cast a film version of By the Way, Meet Vera Stark. That's what I'd like to do. So someone should call me about that.
Yes. Putting it out in the universe. I was so excited when I heard you mention Paul Newman, since in terms of classic films, Cool Hand Luke is one of my all-time favorites. And similar to what you said about, you know, not everything needs an adaptation. In my head, I just love the idea of someone doing a really strong adaptation of that in our current time with our current prison industrial system, and like what that could mean like kind of layering on top of that story. So I'm gonna put that out there too. If any writers are listening, I will sponsor that.
Yes, a Cool Hand Luke play might be interesting. Even though I just also back to Tennessee Williams, I just cast a version of Not About Nightingales, which is his play that's set in prison. That was just this past summer at the Williamstown Theater Festival, directed by Robert O'Hara, who is a genius. And it was incredible. And the relevance of that piece today, when it was like written in the 1930s, was palpable. And some of the choices, to talk about casting, some of the choices that that were made in terms of casting, like, you know, Robert was insistent to have a cast that wasn't, you know, typically the cast of that show would be like mostly white actors. There's one actor that's specifically written to be Black in the story. And we had a Black actor in one of the lead roles, which, without changing a single word, shifted the whole play in a way that made it even more relevant and provocative. So that's something I love about casting, being able to kind of recalibrate the way that people see things.
Absolutely. And I think something that in my life, in my career, I try to emphasize sometimes with directors is that a colorblind approach for them may not be colorblind for the audience. And that if they're not mindful of how they're casting, they might end up telling another story on top of the story. And that may be what they want, or it may be unintentional. And I think that's something that when it's done well and when it's done intentionally can just bring so much life and like in such a new, interesting perspective, like you said, without changing a single word. So before we wrap up, I would love to ask if you have anything I didn't ask about that you wanted to talk about or share, whether it's an exciting new project or, you know, something you've learned maybe from a mentor or, you know, in your time, just, you know, final words for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I'm really happy that I have the opportunity to be someone who hopefully can provide some like mentorship or a bit of a positive example of leadership to, you know, aspiring young Black women and femmes, because that was something that I didn't see as much when I was younger. That I'm really excited that there are more and more people in a similar position to be able to provide that kind of blueprint or example, or you know, even just like being a mentor to people or a sounding board for people who are, you know, looking to move into to entertainment in general, but like theater specifically, because there were definitely fewer examples when I was younger, and I'm glad that there are more people who can light the way.
Well, I can say even in this brief conversation, I feel like you've given me a lot to think about and new ways to kind of look at our overall role in the industry. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me and for joining us for Sisters in the Round.
Thank you so much.